powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you this hour by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bets and take your profit. Find out how. PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. New Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning, and they've got a lot at Eagles camp to discuss. Geoff Mosher and Adam Kaplan recapping the first week of camp position by position. We will kind of take a look at some of the top storylines as well, and I guess one of the top storylines, Geoff Mosher, would be the injury to first-round pick Devonta Smith. 2 to 3 weeks, looks like a minor MCL sprain, but just another kind of a downer, I guess. More frustrating than anything that he will not be able to go. I guess the question would be, how much did you anticipate seeing him in preseason games, if at all, anyway?
I anticipated seeing him a decent amount. You know, I mean, he's a first-round pick, but he's also got a lot to show, a lot to learn. So usually you see those guys get a decent amount of reps in the preseason game. You would imagine that he would have worked in with the first-team offense, but then also maybe gotten some more reps in the second team based on how things were going with him. So his injury, it stinks, honestly, because, you know, it's been a bad start for the wide receiver position already. We saw what happened with Jalen Reagor in the conditioning test. He was only a full participant today for the first time. Quez Watkins missed the first few practices. Greg Ward, with a non-COVID illness, missed the first few practices. I think Travis Fulgham got, kind of banged around one day. So it really does underscore what we've talked about a lot in the offseason, that even with the addition of Devonta Smith and with Jalen Reagor coming back healthier than last year, it's a very young wide receiver group with not a lot of proven talent, and probably could use a veteran at some point. And then maybe we'll see if they wind up adding somebody.
Yeah, I know the frustrating part to me, too, is the fact that here's another year where your first-round pick is not getting those reps. And you got new terminology, you got new coaches, you got a new offense. That is the frustrating part. And, of course, Devonta Smith came in as, he's small, he could be injury-prone, and he answers that right off the bat by getting hurt. That's another part of this whole thing is, hey, is this guy going to be able to hold up?
Yeah, it's a little interesting because I know that we reported on the podcast, the Inside the Birds that dropped this morning, we had reported that the team felt it wasn't that big of a deal, and something must have changed. That was kind of the vibe we got over the weekend, closer to when he had suffered the injury. So I don't know if maybe results came back from a test that revealed something that they didn't expect, and all of a sudden the timeout, became bigger than they thought. I mean, they're still trying to say it's not that bad, and that's fine if it's a grade 1 or 2. I don't know. But the point you're making is accurate, is that here's a guy who needs as many reps as possible. And so does the quarterback needs reps with him. It's not just about him. It's about the whole offense and the timing and the rhythm. And that opportunity is going to be set back for a few weeks.
Yeah, I know that, you mentioned some of the other receivers, but he's the guy. I mean, he's the guy that's going to make this offense either go to another level or kind of stay, very inconsistent, because they don't have that. I mean, it's frustrating to say Reagor is probably not a guy that if you enter the season, which hopefully you don't have to, but you can't say that Reagor's my number one guy. He is probably more of a complimentary piece, right?
Yeah, right now, I mean, you were expecting Devonta Smith to be that number one guy, and you were hoping that the addition of him would help take some pressure off Reagor. You would be able to move Jalen Reagor around a little bit, get him the ball in different ways, and now he kind of has to be a de facto number one if Travis Fulgham's not ready for it, or if Jalen Hurts and the tight end sync isn't going. I mean, it's very possible that Dallas Goedert can be like Zach Ertz a couple of years ago and be the possession receiver. It all just depends on how this offense kind of flows without Devonta Smith.
Yeah, I'm very kind of just disheartened by the fact that he
sucks.
Is out. It really sucks. Like last year when Reagor got hurt, you're like, oh man. But even more anticipation this year because of what he brings to the table. Well, real quick, I mean, Stain Steichen kind of gave an overview of, like, he mentioned Travis Fulgham today, but what is that room looking like right now? Without Smith there, how else is it gone through the first week?
Well, you've seen Hightower get a lot of reps. John Hightower got a lot of reps, not only because of when camp started, Rager was a limited participant and Watkins was out and Ward was out. So Hightower and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside were the biggest beneficiaries of the playing time, and they will continue to be. And you've seen, and by the way, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, it's so funny how the more things change, they stay the same a little bit conceptually, because when we've seen him so far, he's gotten a lot of reps in the slot. And I remember at this time last year, we were talking about how saving his career after a bad first year might be Doug Peterson getting him into the slot more, where he's closer to the ball. He doesn't have to win on the outside with limited speed, right? But what happened? All those injuries to Deshaun, and Alshon wasn't ready, and all of a sudden the wide receiver group had to be moved around, and Jalen Reagor got hurt. And so Arcega-Whiteside probably practiced as much on the outside as the inside, and he didn't really play a whole lot because he just wasn't good in that spot. So now he's practicing at the slot. You're seeing an improvement of him. I mean, the pads haven't come out, but so that's what it looks like now. You're seeing John Hightower get some work. Watkins, now that he's back, will probably get a decent amount of snaps. And of course, Arcega-Whiteside will continue to as well. And Rager, obviously Rager, as I mentioned, becomes kind of that de facto number one. I mean, they're going to still probably move him around. But he's just going to be looked at under a microscope without Devonta Smith there.
Also, Isaac Seumalo has not been out. He's week to week. You've also got Brandon Brooks, who has a minor hamstring tweak. I guess that's more precautionary, but the fact is you got two starting offensive linemen already having some injury issues.
Yeah. Again, as I joked on Twitter the other day, the more things change, the more they stay the same. At one point in practice, you saw Nate Herbig at left guard, Matt Pryor at right guard. And that it's early in camp. It's not a big deal, but it sucks. I mean, you want to see good health. You want to see guys who were injured last year be on a good road to recovery this year and healthy. I think Brandon will be back a little sooner than Seumalo. It's my understanding Brandon's, not as bad, but nonetheless, you just want to see with this team, especially with veterans, right, Mike, with guys over 30, you want to see them consistently out there, not getting a ton of reps, but just healthy and feeling good. Today, Ryan Kerrigan leaves with a hand injury, and it's like there's another veteran gets injured,
Especially with this team with the injuries on the offensive line last year, if you have any expectations, Moshe, for this team, it's, hey, that offensive line, if they're good, they can be really good. And if you have a good offensive line, you can compete every single week. And if you can compete every single week, you can get wins that, that you didn't really anticipate. To lose that. Now, as you mentioned, it sounds like Brandon Brooks is more of a precautionary thing. He did talk today, which injured guys typically don't do, right?
Correct. They usually don't. Rehabbing guys don't. So it sounds like he'll be fine. Yeah. But, again, he hasn't taken a snap in a year. So you just want them out there and you just want good feelings about this team from an injury perspective.
Absolutely. All right. Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. We also, I want to get your take on the other day, Jonathan Gannon kind of spoke a little glowingly about Davion Taylor and where the possibility of him playing could stand. Because I don't think anybody entered camp thinking this guy has a shot to do or help this team out this year.
Right. And then what happens? Alex Singleton starts camp on COVID list. He's still on the COVID list, right? So Davion Taylor winds up getting some opportunities there. They played a lot of zone so far, which is, I think, a good way to learn. You see everything in front of you. You're not just attached to a guy, assigned to a guy and say, run. You get to kind of learn the intricacies of the defense. Good for him. Then what happens? He gets banged up a little bit. Now, I know it wasn't that bad. I believe he was limited today, but this guy needs all the reps that he can get. And it was nice for him to be able to capitalize on Singleton's absence. I saw a lot of different combinations. There were times I saw Sean Bradley out there with Eric Wilson. There were times you see Jannard Avery out there. Remember, he's making a move to linebacker. There's times that you saw, who's the other linebacker? Rashad Smith. So it looks to me, and I don't think this should surprise anybody, but that Jonathan Gannon is trying to figure out who's best in what package at what situation, because he doesn't have clear-cut starters who are three-down linebackers. He's got a lot of guys who are probably best put in certain situations. So he's trying to find out the right combinations right now.
All right, let's take a look at some of the other stories that are happening here. Backup running back. How are we breaking that down after the first week? Because I find this story to be very interesting because it almost seemed like, all right, you got Miles Sanders, and then there's like definitively this guy versus that guy, and this guy versus this guy, and the winners of these two. So how are we reading the way they're using the running backs?
Well, it's funny. If you go back to the InsideTheBirds.com training camp preview that I did with Andrew DeCecco, right? We talked about that battle specifically for number 2 running back between Jordan Howard and Kerryon Johnson. And I remember writing, when you look at the resume and the talent and, what they've done in the NFL in their draft pedigree, you would think that if all things are equal, Kerryon Johnson should win this thing going away. It was a second-round pick. He had some success there with the Lions. Most of his lack of success was because of injury, right? But I also wrote there's something about Jordan Howard and this team. I mean, they were the only team that wanted him. He admitted that. He said, nobody wanted me. The Eagles did. This is his 3rd time here. And whenever he's in this uniform, he seems to perform better than either expected or where he came from. So already you've seen he's gotten most of those reps. He's probably gotten more carries than Miles Sanders, mainly because they already know what they got in Miles and they're trying to keep him healthy. And I haven't really seen much of Kerryon Johnson. So I have to say, I mean, Adam and I both saw the same things on different days. Right now, he looks like the leader in the clubhouse for that number 2 running back job because he's in good shape. He's running fast for him. He's never been a burner. He looks athletic. He looks healthy and ready to go. And you don't see too much of Kerryon Johnson. Now, of course, it's early. There's a lot of time. Pad's got to come out, but that's how it looks now. And I would say that the team is clearly, this is something we talked about after the draft. We had heard that the Eagles would like to get some 2 running back formations out there, which we've heard before, right? Darren Sproles and whoever, but never really seemed to do it. But you're starting to see it. And Kenneth Gainwell has shown them crisp route running, catching the ball. We haven't really seen a whole lot of runs yet because it's not really, with the pads out, it doesn't make any sense, but he's done what he's been asked to do. If he can continue along this trajectory, Mike, and show that he can handle the workload, then I think that they're going to try to get him on the field pretty early as long as he can handle it.
Moshe, I know that a lot of people are looking at the defensive end position, and it's Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett, Josh Sweat. You mentioned Kerrigan, but how do you read the Sweat-Kerrigan Barnett kind of battle over there?
Yeah, that's another thing that we go back to our preview, and one of the when we did player on decline, I'd spent a lot of time thinking about this. There's a lot of over 30 guys that would have been easy to put in there, but I felt that Derek Barnett, just hunch, right, was just not, just based on history, I felt that Sweat was ready to come really challenge him. And Josh Sweat has challenged him so far. And Josh Sweat is, I think it's fair to say, so far outperforming probably everybody on the D-line. He's been a beast. He's not just with pass rush, but I know there were a couple of option plays where he made the right decision and would have stopped the quarterback in the backfield. So he's doing everything right. And he's got a chance, I think, he's always been a guy whose snaps have been monitored. We've talked about his knee injuries that go back far. He's healthy. He's in good shape now. Maybe this medical staff and coaching staff believe he can handle a bigger workload. I don't know if he'll start, but, I know Adam Kaplan predicted on our podcast. He said, I'm going to say it, even if I wind up being wrong, but this guy will probably outperform and get more snaps than Derek Barnett. He just looks like a better pass rusher altogether than Derek Barnett at this stage of their careers. Remember, the guy had six sacks last year, 3rd on the team, and he was playing 40% of the snaps. Yeah. So that's a pretty good number right there.
Well, and I guess
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess if Sweat ends up being the guy that gets more reps and gets more snaps, that's probably a positive, though, right?
It's a positive. I try not to look too far ahead, but I'm wondering if Sweat, they want him to be that guy, if Kerrigan, they like what they see, if Jannard Avery, they continually like to see as a kind of a pass rushing linebacker. Are they going to have Derek Barnett still on the team making $10 million as a kind of situational pass rusher? Or is he a guy that by the end of camp they're looking to kind of trade and see what they can do there? I don't know. We're a long way from there, but I always take the economics into play when you start looking at the roster and how it shapes out and this is why we talk about Zach Ertz and how much sense does it make to have an $8.5 million backup tight end, right? So the same thing with Barnett. How much sense would it make to have a $10 million situational pass rusher? Now, they did this with Nelson Aguilar a few years ago where they picked up his 5th-year option and they paid him the big money to be a slot receiver. You can argue a slot receiver, though, was a starter in the league, and they thought he would be a lot better than he wound up being that year. But I don't know. We'll have to see what shakes out with that. As far as Kerrigan, by the way, I just want to say it's my understanding that it's more of a finger injury than an overall hand injury. So it doesn't sound very serious. We'll have to see what the team says tomorrow.
Do you anticipate, and does the team anticipate, Kerrigan has a bigger role than what he had in Washington last year anyway?
See, that I don't know. I think, just like when they brought Chris Long here, they kept that role. I mean, once he started to prove what he can do, you probably saw him play more snaps, but they never let it get past too much, right? In fact, if you remember, the falling out between, if you can call it that, between Chris Long and the Eagles and Jim Schwartz was that he didn't want to come back and just be limited to a certain number of snaps, and then so he retired. I imagine, without really knowing for sure, that the plan would be similar with Kerrigan. I said this to Adam in the pod. I can't remember if he had a knee history, if he had any kind of surgeries in the past. I don't know, but I would think that they don't envision him as a starter. But then again, we've seen guys get hurt, and if Brandon Graham were to get hurt, or Graham and Barnett, or Barnett and Sweat, then all of a sudden he's in that kind of role. It's going to be interesting to see if some of these younger DNs, whether like Osman and the kid they drafted, Teron Jackson, can kind of impress them enough to make the 53 in case they're relied on.
What is your read so far? Anybody tipping their hand at left tackle?
I wouldn't say you can call it, Mike, but Jordan Mailata, I mean, right now it's 50-50 in my mind as far as snaps, but as far as who is already showing that they're up to the speed and up to the challenge, it looks like Jordan Mailata more so than Andre Dillard. Dillard, we talked about this, about it's great when you admit what you need to do and you come out, and Dillard was certainly upfront about being a different person. And I always use the expression, but do zebras really change their stripes?
Right.
And so far out there, he's been worked over quite a few times by some guys. He's got those short arms, so he struggles against the bull rushers, and he's got to get nastier and tougher and fight. Now, the pads will come out. Maybe that helps him. I don't know. I'm just saying, sitting here today, I think that Mailata is the clear leader here in the clubhouse.
What happens to Dillard if he loses that battle?
It's a great question. And to me, well, it almost depends on, does he lose because Dillard is completely awful, and then does that kind of ruin the trade value a little bit? Do you try to keep him as a backup, or weigh the idea of just trading him for anything at that point? There's a lot of, I'd like to hope that you're going to see him improve a little bit, and he may never really steal the job away from Mailata, but you would like for him to make it competitive enough that you feel strong about him as a backup offensive tackle, which is very important in this league.
Right.
But I can't say that right now you're even convinced he's going to be the best backup tackle option.
Right. Well, we know that he does not like or feel comfortable playing right tackle. That kind of limits him, right?
Yeah. But sometimes you got to do what you don't like to do. And then when you have to do it, you need to have the real attitude about it. I'm going to go at least try my hardest.
We know Carson Wentz 5 to 12 weeks. Very vague in that. Number one, of course, how that affects the Eagles. And number two, I guess, the Colts need a quarterback. Nick Mullins is on this team. He's probably a better backup option as your third than other teams have, no?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's certainly more experienced, right, than most third-string quarterbacks.
More experienced.
I heard Nick Foles was out there in
Eason.
Chicago basically saying, trade me.
Yeah.
The
Foles good. Thing is going to – that's what I'm saying. You're going to start to find, okay, who are veteran quarterbacks, he's a third stringer, Mullins is a third stringer, and they're probably both better options than Jacob Eason at this point.
Probably. I would think that the Colts are going to be out there looking. Now, some of it, they've got some – they're in a weird position, right? Because Carson may heal it closer to the 4 or 5 week time frame, and he may be ready by week 1, week 2. You're not really missing him a whole lot, but you don't know that right now. So all you have in camp right now is Jacob Eason and the Sam Ehlinger kid from Texas, and I know they just signed Brett Hundley. So it wouldn't surprise me if they look to make a move for someone. There's got to be somebody out there that they can make a move. But that guy can be a good backup just in case, if Carson comes back. But it's probably not going to be Nick Foles. That would be the irony of all ironies.
That would be unbelievable. Just how weird would that? And then, of course, Foles would get off to like a 4-1 start. when Wentz is ready to return, and then they can't put him back in because of that. That would just be, I don't know, so crazy. But
everybody in Philly would just be eating their popcorn watching.
Well, and of course, like the 5 to 12 week time frame makes it so vague to see, can he get 75% of the snaps in? If it's not 75, it's 70, but they have to make the playoffs. Where are they 0-4 when he comes back? So, this trade has really taken an interesting turn. And, how that affects all of the talk about Deshaun Watson, and then I guess Peter King threw in the mix that they would be interested in Aaron Rodgers in the offseason. But if they don't have that extra first-round pick, does that kind of subside a little bit?
Well, it depends on just who they're competing against. I mean, they still could have 2 first-round picks and 2 seconds. I mean, we'd have to see how it shakes out. I mean, it still could be 4 top, 65, 70 picks, which is pretty enticing, I think. But it all depends on who your competition is and what they have to offer.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, at Geoff Mosher NFL, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Follow him at Inside Birds. The new one dropped this morning. You can get plenty more on all the position battles, position-by-position conversation with Jeff and Adam Kaplan. And tomorrow, Andrew DeCecco will give his thoughts on the Eagles at training camp. They are back. They open up on the 12th against the Steelers. All right, Moshe, take care, man.
Pads come out tomorrow, brother. Great
Here we
day.
go. Pads are back. Pads are back. Football's back. Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. That's Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Every day, Football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash.